Good morning. This is John Sicola, and I am with the Foundation for Financial Education and welcome you to today's webinar. Today's webinar will be on retirement planning for federal employees. As I said, it's presented by the Foundation for Financial Education. We're a 501(c) nonprofit. Our mission is to bring financial literacy and education to the public and private employees. Pardon me. Allergies are getting me here, so bear with me, please. Again, I want to let you know our foundation is funded through grants and corporate private donations. There's never a charge for attending any of our events. Also, as we go through the information today, if you have any specific questions, you'll have a chance to put those into the chat box at the end at our survey, and then we'll try to answer a few of those before we end our visit today. So what we're going to talk about today is retirement planning for federal employees and really what makes it unique, especially compared to private sector plans. We'll get into that a little more detail a little bit later, but let's go ahead and start with a quick overview of what we're going to discuss today. So to begin, there's really 6 things that we want to touch on. The first one is, what makes us special? What is unique and different about federal employee retirement planning versus private sector planning? You actually have a few unique advantages in retirement that aren't available in the private sector, and we're going to touch on that. Secondly, rules of the game. Just like any other games we play, there are some rules, and if you know the rules, you can really do a lot better and play the game to win. Number 3, a lot of people don't think about this, but what will your tax bracket be in retirement? We've all been told certain things all our lives about that. The answer to that may surprise you. We'll touch on that. Understanding your TSP and your IRA options and taking full advantage of your accounts. You probably have a pretty good handle on your TSPs, but we'll just touch on that briefly. And then number 5 is protection components. And that's basically, we're going to touch on what are your options at retirement as it relates to some of your insurance provisions that you have. And then lastly, we'll finish up with exit strategies. And by that, what we're going to reference is when you're ready to retire, how to exit out and take advantage of the plans that you have to the most advantageous method that you have. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and get started here first with, what makes a federal employee retirement plan so special? Well, first thing we want to talk about is, you guys, we have a 3-legged stool environment. Most retirees and pre-retirees don't have that, and today never will. What we're talking about is your federal employee retirement system plan is a 3-legged stool, and it's made up of 3 elements. You've got your pension, your thrift savings plan, and Social Security. Today, you may not know this, but today less than 12% of all companies offer a traditional pension plan like you have. They just don't exist anymore. So that's one thing that really makes a federal employee plan really unique and valuable. Secondly, as you know, your TSP plan, your thrift plan, it allows you to save money in a tax-deferred manner. And of course, if you participate in it, the government will put in an extra 5%, up to 5% of your contribution, and that can make a huge difference. Third, nowadays, most federal employees participate in Social Security as well. So between your pension, your TSP, and Social Security, that can make a huge retirement account for you. So let's just give you an example of how this could play out. I'm just using a hypothetical example. Let's just say that a person's making $60,000 per year. They've worked for 30 years, and they're going to retire at 66, Social Security retirement age. Well, at 66, your pension would be approximately $2,800 a month. Your Social Security at full retirement age would be approximately $2,200 a month. And if you contributed 5% into your TSP every year, and you had the 5% match, then at 66, at a 5% rate of return on those dollars, that would give you another $1,700. You'd have $6,700 in retirement per month. So, I mean, you can see where that becomes a pretty big number. And actually, there's actually a fourth leg on this stool that a lot of folks don't really think about, and that's your personal savings and investments. If you invest well personally, maybe have some rent property, things that are generating income like that, that can even be added to that. You can see that you can have a really comfortable retirement. Now, with that, again, you got to know the rules of the game. Without knowing the rules of the game, some of these things can really become at a disadvantage. So what we're going to talk about today is retirement eligibility, pension calculation, breaks in service, buyouts and buybacks, and your TSP income. So to maximize your retirement, you got to know the rules. I'm not going to go through the pension calculations today because they can get a little cumbersome, but your pension is going to be based upon your age, your length of service, and the average of your highest 3-year salary. Now, that does not include your bonuses. Also, one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, what happens if I have a break in service? How does that affect my pension plan? Well, just to kind of refresh you, in order to be fully vested in the pension plan, you have to have 5 years of employment. It doesn't have to be 5 consecutive years. Let's say you worked for a couple of years, decided you want to take a break and go back to school, maybe try something else, do something else, but then ultimately decide that you want to come back into government service. So let's say you worked for 2 years, you were out 3 or 4 years, and then you came back. Once you've come back and put those extra 2 years in, you now have gotten your 5 years of service for vesting, and you can be fully vested in your retirement plan again. Now, there is a caveat to that. If you did cash out of your plan, took funds out and cashed out when you left after 2 years, you would have to repay those funds back into the plan in order to be fully vested. But that's really about the only issue that you'll come up with. So things you need to know on their TSP. If once you're 59 and a half, you no longer have a 10% premature distribution penalty. So if you were to retire, leave after 59 and a half, there's no penalties. You could also roll over as an option when you leave. You can roll over your TSP to any type of self-directed IRA if you choose. You can manage it yourself. By doing that, some of the advantage are oftentimes you can have reduced little to no fees for managing your account, and that can be substantial over time as well. If you're like me, you've heard forever that, when you retire, we've always been told we're going to be in a lower tax bracket. The taxes won't be an issue when I retire because I'll just be older and won't have that problem. Well, let's take a look at that. Here we go. Remember in our earlier example, if you made 60K, with your 3 legs of income, you would have approximately $6,700 a month in retirement. Well, that's $80,400 a year. And just to give you an idea, at today's tax rates, if you were filing married jointly and you have an AGI of 60K, your marginal tax rate today would be 12%. If the rates are the same when you retire, your marginal tax rate would be 22%. But did you know what happens in 2025? A lot of people aren't even aware of this. The way that when the new tax law was put in place in 2017, there was a provision that in 2025, everything reverts back to the 2016 tax codes. And in that scenario, your $60,000 income would be taxed at 15%, and your retirement income would be taxed at 25%. So depending on what happens in November, that could change earlier. So might not be a good idea to see if there are ways to use a tax code to your advantage. Those are some of the things to consider. Also, tax rates are at historically low rates. As you all know, Congress just passed a second stimulus package that's worth $500 billion. That goes along with the $2.2 trillion that was passed a few weeks ago. And they're talking about even doing more. Well, my question is, the thing to think about is, whose money is that? Whose money are they spending? Well, they're spending our money, and they're spending money that doesn't exist at this point. Where's it coming from? It's coming from us. And the only way they're going to be able to ever repay this is to increase taxes, in my opinion. So tax rates more than likely will go up to pay for the stimulus and all the other deficit spending we've been doing. So, right now we're in the lowest tax rate structure that we've ever been in. And you might want to learn some of the rules, or might want to know some of the rules on how to take advantage of that. The next thing we want to talk about, let's spend a few minutes on the thrift savings plan. As you know, the thrift savings plan is similar to your 401k. For 2020, you can contribute up to $19,500. And if you're over 50, you have a catch-up provision of an additional $6,500. In addition to that, you also have a loan provision, and what the loan provision is that you can actually borrow against your TSP up to $50,000. And there's a few rules on that that you can find in FedWatch. But basically, it's generally 50% of your account up to $50,000, and sometimes you can make up to 2 loans as long as you're current. You check with your HR folks for the exact information on that. The other thing to think about, or you might want to consider, is that you have the option of doing a Roth IRA or a traditional, a Roth contribution to your TSP, or a traditional contribution. And you can actually do both as long as you don't exceed the maximum values. Just real quickly, you may know this already for those the Roth contributions are ways to contribute money on an after-tax basis. So you put money in, you pay tax on your contribution. However, the money does grow tax deferred. And more importantly, if it stays there 5 years or once you're past 59 and a half, that money can all come back to you on an income tax-free basis. The traditional plans, the money is pre-taxed, so you save some taxes today, but when you're ready to retire, take the money out, 100% of the proceeds are fully taxable as income. So, you might want to look at those, and in light of where our tax rates are today, the Roth might be something to really consider today, because going back to our example earlier, if you're in a 12% tax bracket today and you made a $10,000 contribution to your Roth, for example, and you had to pay $1,200 of taxes, well, the remaining $8,800 gross tax-free forever. And when you're ready to take it out, you pay no income tax. Going by the same scenario, if you look at the traditional, you put in $10,000, you pay no tax on it now, but when you're ready to take the money out 20, 30 years from now, you'll pay 100% tax on those dollars. And if tax rates do go up, and we're looking at the example we had, when you retire, your tax rate is going to be, in today's tax bracket, it's going to be 22%. And if taxes revert, it'll be 25%. So it might make sense to consider making some of your contributions into a Roth to get that tax deferred growth and tax-free income at retirement. The other thing you have are IRA rollover options. So when you do leave service and you have the ability to roll your money over, if you choose, into a self-directed IRA, individual retirement account. Now, the advantage of that is you can control where you want your investments to go. You can go, you have the addition to just what's available in your TSP, you basically have the world of investments to choose from. So again, it's just something to know that you have available when you do leave. The next thing to touch on is we want to go ahead and touch on some of your protection components that are available. You know, you've got disability, short-term and long-term. You've got your federal employees group life insurance program. You've also got your federal employees long-term care program, and of course the SPB. On the short-term, long-term disability, just the way those work briefly is if you should become disabled and it looks like the disability is expected to last 12 months or less, then you have short-term disability, and that pays a small flat rate per week until you are no longer disabled, or you stay disabled 12 months or longer, and then it rolls into your long-term disability. So to give you an example of how that might work, pardon me, the way it works is on long-term disability, for the first year, you would get 60% of your pre-disability earnings. And if you were making $60,000 a year, that would be $36,000 of taxable income. And of course, in the second year on, it would be 40% thereafter. So it'd be $24,000. And the thing about that a lot of people don't think of as well is that these are income taxable dollars. So if you were making $60,000 and normally would pay tax on that, now your income is reduced to $36,000 and you've got to pay income tax on that. That can be a pretty significant drop in income. So you might want to check on options of adding to your disability through personal disability insurance. Have your advisors look into that for you and talk to you about that. And also, I apologize, and also in order to qualify for the long-term disability, you have to have had 18 months of service in order to qualify. The next area to go on is your federal employee group life insurance. There's a couple of elements to that. The first is your basic coverage, and your basic coverage starts at $10,000, and then depending upon what your salary is and length of time, that can be up to $40,000. Now, this is what is called term life insurance, and there's no cost to you on the basic. You can buy supplemental as well. You can get that up to 5 times your annual income. And those really are pretty good deals up until the time you get about 50 or so. Once you start hitting 50, the price starts accelerating rapidly. And at retirement, a couple of things happen. First, the cost can be prohibitive on the supplemental in retirement. You can be talking about paying, $30 or $40 when you're 30. And then when you're in your 60s, that actually can go up into several hundreds of dollars per month. Now, on your basic coverage, the way it works is once you retire, hit 65 and retire, that basic coverage starts reducing 2% per month until the base hits $2,500. So once it hits $2,500, then that levels off. Now that is free. You never have to pay for it before anymore. But the $2,500 is the maximum that your base will be. So again, you might want to consider, when you're looking at supplemental, you might want to consider talking to your insurance advisor or your financial advisor or planners about looking into some type of permanent life insurance plan, so that when you retire, you'll have life insurance for the rest of your life. And again, at the foundation, we have volunteers that will sit with you for free. There's never a charge for talking to anyone at the foundation. If you have questions about these programs and some of the options that are available, at the end on the survey, you can make a note of that, and then someone from the foundation will give you a call, and they'll be happy to visit with you and talk to you about your options and answer any questions that are specific to your situation. The next area is what is the Federal Employee Long-Term Care Insurance Program. This is available to you as well. This program is really a great program because it provides a basic level of long-term care, and this plan can go with you when you retire. One thing to know about long-term care is that rates are typically not guaranteed. The plans are guaranteed. They can't be canceled on you, but the plans themselves, the rates themselves can increase over time depending upon claims, age, and other factors that are mandated and have to be approved by the state that you're in, that you live in. Also, when it comes to healthcare, Medicare, you have provisions once you retire. Excuse me. Once you hit 65, you're eligible for Medicare, and you can get Part A and Part B. That covers your hospitalization and doctor visits, things like that. You'd also need to get what we call a Part D, which is prescription medications. Those plans are fairly inexpensive. They range about $130 to $140 per person. And then of course, you can also, when you retire, you can buy a supplemental plan, or you can get into one of the HMO type plans. And you can really, when you retire, basically between supplemental and the Medicare plans, you can virtually have 100% of your medical care covered, with that no out of pocket in most cases. So just know that those are available, and they can provide some valuable benefits for you. And as I mentioned, you can have one of the local foundation volunteers review these coverages for you, and there's no charge. The foundation never charges. The foundation, we get all of our funds from grants and corporate and private donations, and we have a network of volunteers across 30 offices across the country. So we pretty much have offices in pretty much all areas where we're happy to visit with you and answer a lot of your questions for you. Now let's go into a couple of other things, and maybe we'll have time to answer some questions here. But we talk about exit strategies. And really the exit strategy has to do with the when, where, and how to take income in retirement. So the when, the where, and the how to take income in retirement. Let's talk about that. When, the when is at what age? Should you retire 60, 62, 70? Well, the when is totally up to you. You can retire whenever you like, and some people don't want to retire. Some people want to retire as soon as possible. So the real key here is that making sure that when you're able to retire, that you're maximizing your resources and your assets, and so that you can have an enjoyable retirement and stay retired, sleep well at night. So just a couple of things to go over with you. So for example, Social Security. Most of you know this, the longer you wait, the higher your benefit. As a matter of fact, from 66 to 70, every year that you delay your Social Security, your benefit actually grows by 8% a year, and that's a guaranteed 8%. I don't know about you guys, but there aren't too many investments out there that are guaranteeing an 8% rate of return. A lot of people don't know that, but Social Security is a pretty good deal. With your TSP, your pension plans, you know, once you hit your actual minimum retirement age with those plans, again, you got to kick in your formula, and it's based on your age plus years of service. So you want to make sure that those add up so that you're eligible for your maximum amounts. And then the other thing is that a lot of people ask us is, you know, when they're ready to retire, what they might want to move. They might want to move. You hear people moving to, they used to move to Mexico, and I don't know if they still do, but there used to be a couple of communities just across the border that were very low cost of living. Lots of Americans were retiring there. I'm not sure that's the place to go these days, but when it comes to, have you ever thought about if you'd like to move, or depending on the state you live in, there's actually states that don't charge a state income tax. They don't make you pay a state income tax on your federal pension retirement plans. So for example, if you live in Alabama, Alaska, Florida, Illinois, Mississippi, Nevada, New Hampshire, or Pennsylvania, you have no state income tax on your federal pension plan. And that can also not only save you some money in taxes, but obviously that would increase your after-tax income. Not only that, but depending on where your income comes from in retirement, some anywhere from 50% to 85% of your Social Security income can be taxed. So it becomes real important when you're looking at your different asset allocations and your strategies to try to make sure you've got some tax-free income in retirement, because that can help mitigate potentially taxes on your Social Security. The other thing that's real important when you're starting to retire and looking at retiring is maximizing your interest rate and reducing risk. So one question I always like to ask my clients, or one of the things we bring up when folks come in, is what if you retired in 2008 in January, and then we had the market crash in March of 2008? We had almost a 40% drop in the market. Could you stay retired? More importantly, what happened if people were retiring in January of this year, and then because of the COVID outbreak, the market dropped drastically, and the TSPs, 401ks lost significant value? Would you be able to stay retired? We bring that up because all we're talking about there is it just becomes so important to make sure that your assets are allocated in what we call a strategic allocation, as opposed to what we call the traditional asset allocation. And traditional asset allocation are things like, if you look in your programs, a lot of times there'll be things like what are called age-based retirement risk assets. So if you're 50 years old, for example, you just put it into an account, and it automatically allocates your assets, your investments, into certain categories that they assume are age appropriate. And then each year, as you get older, those assets automatically allocate. So the younger you are, the more money is going to be in stocks. As we get older, more of that money starts automatically being moved over into bonds, so that quote, you reduce the risk. And that's not a bad strategy in theory. The problem is, if you're, let's say, for example, you're 40 years old, 45 years old, and maybe you're in a 70% stock position and a 30% bond position. Well, let's say we have another market drop like the one we're seeing right now or the one in 2008. And let's say when that happens, you happen to cross the next threshold to where now it flips, and now you've got 40% in stocks and 60% in bonds. Well, what's going to happen is they are going to sell off some of those stock positions and move you into bonds, and it makes it difficult, if not impossible, for you ever to recover those losses that took place. And again, those are automatic things that happen. So it might be, it might be in your interest to talk to someone and talk about what are called strategic assets, strategic allocations, where you are positioning yourself so that you don't have to have yourself in such a high risk, but yet have the opportunity to have great growth. And that's just part of maximizing interest and reducing risk. And so, those are the things you want to make sure of. And then, of course, leveraging your assets. That's making sure that your assets work for you as much as possible to your advantage. Just to give you an example, a lot of folks, when they're looking at their what I call their piles of money, they're different asset categories. You may have real estate, you may have your TSP, you may have a pension plan, you may have a 401k from a previous employer, IRAs, stocks, bonds, the whole world of investments and opportunities out there. And each one of those working by themselves may be really working well, but the flip side to that is you may have one asset that may be doing well, but it may actually be having a potentially negative impact on another asset that you own. And that could be through taxes, things like that. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at all your different assets, that everything's positioned so they're all working in harmony together. Same thing with protection, for example. Earlier we mentioned long-term care. One of the issues of that is that rates aren't guaranteed. And the plan is, but rates aren't guaranteed. Well, there are different avenues out there today. Just to give you an example, in the insurance world, there are actually life insurance policies that are available today that include long-term care in them, and the rates are guaranteed, and the rates will never go up. And actually, if you set it up properly, you can have the plan pay for itself so that it doesn't have an impact on your monthly expenses, and it doesn't negatively impact your budget and the money that you have to spend. And again, those are just a couple of examples of things that are out there that they can help leverage your assets to your advantage. Like I said, the volunteers here, they can also certainly talk to you about the exit strategies. And at the end of this, if you just don't mind, take a minute to fill out the survey. And if you have any specific questions, please put them down. We'll do our best to try to answer a few of them here. And then if you would like to visit with someone from the foundation, just put that in on the survey. And of course, you will be contacted. That's pretty much sums up. I know it's a very brief summary of some of the retirement options and strategies that are available. If you have any questions, we'll try to answer a few of them now. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, appreciate your time, appreciate you joining in. And you guys enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend. Thanks.